Hey, folks, this is Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and you're listening to the Interactive Interview. Tough guy.
You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
The Interactive Interview, we're pleasured to be joined here by Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Hacksaw, how you doing?
Well, thank you, brother, but you know the first thing old Hacksaw has to do is give a big ho! Kind of fires me up, you know, brother.
Well,
I'm doing good. You got some questions for me, I guess.
Yes, we do. We haven't seen you since TNA on TV anyway. How you been doing the last couple of years?
I've been doing great, thanks. I do a few independents, and I've been going over to Japan about 5 times a year. But my main bread and butter is I have a real estate company here in Florida that's doing real well.
I read that on your website, hacksawjimduggan.com. It's a really well-designed website.
Well, thank you, yes. A young man up in, Matt up in Halifax is doing that for me. He does a nice job for me.
Just this past weekend you were a part of, or I think it was about 2 weeks ago, you did the Wrestle Reunion. We did a ton of interviews to promote this event, but we have not yet spoken to anybody who was actually there. How did it turn out?
Well, I thought it was great. I'm not sure how the promoters made a whole lot of money off it with so many guys there. I think they had a total of 86 guys is the number I heard of. So it's It's hard to be a money maker when you bring in 86 fellas, because I figure at least 70 of them had trans, you know. But it was a great time. I think the fans really had a chance to interact with the wrestlers and get to ask some questions. And it was a great time for the wrestlers because, you know, we got to see people like, you know, Harley Race was there, and Nick Bockwinkel, Bobby Heenan, Bill Watson. So it was like an old home week. It was a lot of fun.
We normally try to go in chronological order of the guest career. So first question that I have for you is, what made you decide to become a professional wrestler?
Well, I met, I met Fritz Von Erich on a recruiting trip when I made my trip to SMU, where I ended up playing my college football, and Fritz suggested I try professional wrestling. But back then I was just mainly interested in playing professional football. And then in 1977, the Atlanta Falcons picked me up, and I stayed a season with them, was released in 78, went up to Canada, but I saw I had no real future in football, and gave Fritz a call and made the transition to wrestling.
We've had both Missy Hyatt and Shane Douglas on a few times, and both of them talk very highly of the UWF promotion that you were a part of. How did you enjoy working for Bill Watts in the UWF?
Well, Bill treated me real well, especially after Junkyard Dog and Jake the Snake left and went up to New York. He was trying to keep what talent he had left there in Louisiana, and paid me really well. And to this day, that Mid-South territory, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Arkansas, is still a hotbed for me. It was a great time in my life and a great time in wrestling.
Your character was definitely, and still is, really over with the crowd. And at one point, it was the Cold War, and you were the proud American. But going back, where did you get the idea to carry the 2x4 from?
2x4 came back, I think, when I was working for Joe Blanchard in San Antonio. Buck Robley and Bruiser Brody called me. I was working for the Fullers down in Pensacola, and asked me to come to the San Antonio territory and work with Brody, because he needed a big heel to work with. And I made the move, and so many guys were carrying, you know, feathered boas and sequin robes. And old Brody told me, he said, if you're going to carry something in the ring, he said, carry something you can use. So the 2x4 kind of evolved into it.
How about the trademark, I don't want to do it, but I'll do it, the trademark ho, where did that come from? Is that Johnny Carson? Or?
Hey, young man, you got to work on your hose. If you're going to do it, it's like wrestling. If you're going to do it, baby, you got to feel it from the heart. And that's where it came from. I mean, I'm just out there with the people, and I think that's one of the reasons why the people enjoy watching me wrestle, is they know how much I enjoy being out there. And that's just kind of my way to give back to them and get them more involved in the match. And it's just something that started to happen way back early in my career.
Yeah, definitely.
I always wondered if you got it from like Johnny Carson or the Thundercats or something from that.
I'm not sure who the Thundercats are.
It's a cartoon show. They used to hold. It's a 80s cartoon show. They used to hold swords in the air and say ho. So it was like similar.
A lot of guys said it was up in New York when I was calling a girl, but that's a whole other story there.
There was an incident involving you and the Iron Sheik, and if you don't want to talk about this, that's fine. But first of all, what was the drug situation like in the WWF back in the late 80s?
The drug situation in WWF was just like it was in society. That's when our former president Bill Clinton was smoking pot, along with me and a lot of other people were smoking pot. It was just a cross section of society. I mean, there's a lot of drugs in the 80s in all sports and in all sections of life. Maybe a little more in the WWF because of the scheduling we had. A lot of people try to compare that time frame of wrestling to a sports team. You really weren't like a sports team at all. You were more like a band, and when you're hot, you're hot. So when you're working on top, you sometimes work 340, 350 days a year, and a lot of guys did that. And a lot of guys, sometimes you need a little something to get through the pain, or you fly over to London and you get in the morning and do a show that night. So a few uppers would help you, and you need a few sleeping pills on the plane, and some people just really got caught into the lifestyle.
Did that affect kayfabe at all, that you were in the car with such a known heel like the Iron Sheik?
Sure. Oh, yeah. I never recuperated from that bust. Well, of course, I was over 21, so I should have known better. But just coming into the WWF, the Sheik, who I didn't really know, asked me for a ride. The police officer saw us drinking beer in the car, pulled us over, smelled the weed, which I had. I got arrested for a misdemeanor marijuana bust for less than a quarter ounce of pot. But the Sheik had 3 grams of cocaine in separate containers. So the press, it was Duggan Sheik, drug arrest, cocaine, marijuana. It was never really specified what happened. The Sheik, of course, had a felony arrest and had to go through the whole court system and everything. I was charged with misdemeanor marijuana bust and was expunged off my record after 6 months.
As a kid growing up, I remember the first thing I thought about you was, and the first time I really had a chance to see you, to be honest with you, before I went back and watched old tapes, was, holy crap, that guy knocked out Andre. How important was that in the scheme of your character, that incident with Andre the Giant?
Well, not really much as the scheme of my character, but more in just elevated me. I was like a semi-main middle card type talent for the Vince, and that elevated me to a main event talent. So, it was a highlight of my career to be the only man ever to knock Andre the Giant out, and it's something I'll always remember and something I'll always appreciate the Giant doing for me.
We've read a few interviews, and everybody asks you this, and this is a big thing people are going to remember you for, but how special for you was it that you won the very first Royal Rumble?
Yeah, well, that's back then, it wasn't really that big of a deal because we got done with that show, got in the car, and drove to another show. And, it was just a really hectic time period. Of course, I realized that it was quite something to win something like that, but I didn't really have time to reflect on it because I was working, pretty much almost every day of the year, so it just was another day at the office.
You had a feud going on with Yokozuna, kind of the anti-American versus the proud patriot type feud. How did you like working with Yokozuna?
I like Big Yoko quite a bit. We got to know each other well. I think Mr. Fuji, his manager, really added a lot to him, and we had some really great matches, and I just enjoyed it.
Do you feel Lex Luger with the Lex Express stole your thunder at all?
No. I tell you, Lex, they gave him the bust, they gave him the big push, and he still couldn't carry the USA gimmick. They've been trying to give that flag and board. I know Vince had a whole bunch of guys carrying 2x4s for a while.
Ahmed Johnson is the one that comes to my mind. He had the board for a while, yeah.
And I think even the Big Show had a board for a little while there. I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't watched wrestling in quite a while.
Actually, yeah, he did, in the Union, yeah.
I never felt threatened by anybody doing my character. I don't think anybody could, even, who's the kid up there, Kurt Angle. I mean, he's a great talent and a great wrestler, but I don't think he conveys the USA character like I do. And that's why I still think I'm so popular now on the independent shows and at the armed service bases around the country and the world.
Why did you decide to leave the WWF?
Well, Ted Turner offered me a no-cut contract, so that's when you had Hogan left, I left, Jimmy Hart left, Beefcake left. There was a whole exodus of guys leaving Vince to go down before Turner decided to be more competitive in the sport and offer the guys contracts, which up to that day was unheard of. And of course, with the influx of the WWF talent coming into WCW, guys like Helmsley and Austin and those people left and went up to Vince.
Was Hulk Hogan at all involved in you going over to WCW?
Sure, yeah. Hogan's a very good friend of mine, and when he was talking about going in there, he's the type of wrestler that we kind of work in the same type of arena where it's more not as much work as gimmick, let's say. And I know if Hogan would be popular in that, if they were giving him an opportunity like that, that'd be a good place for me to go. So when I talked to Hulkster, he said he was going down to WCW, that'd be interested in talking to me and looking for a no-cut contract, because that's the bottom line about this business. A lot of guys worry about how many belts they won and how many championships and all that. This is a business, and the only way to judge success is how financially well you're off after you get out of the business. It makes no difference how many belts you have.
Yeah. Backtracking just a tad, before you left WWF, you had a feud on Monday Night Raw that headlined quite a few of those episodes with the Intercontinental Champion at the time, Shawn Michaels. Do you have any thoughts on working with Shawn?
Yeah, I enjoyed working with Shawn. I knew him down in Mid-South, and I've always kind of liked him. He wasn't the kind of guy that I would run around and hang with. He hang with a different type of guys, kind of the GQ guys like Hall and Nash and that group. But I enjoyed working with him, and I respect Shawn because he came up the hard way. Later on, as he got bigger and bigger star, he got a bigger and bigger head and got harder to deal with. And, I haven't really had much to do with him in years, but I know his reputation kind of says that he's kind of a jerk as he got to be a bigger star.
Early on in WCW, you won the U.S. title from Steve Austin in a really short match. Did you ever feel that Steve was going to be as big as he became?
No, I to this day, and that's, what Vince does for somebody. I don't think Austin went up there. I may be wrong, but I don't think Austin went up there with a Stone Cold deal.
No.
I think Vince came up with the idea of a Stone Cold and stuck it on Austin. He carried the ball and did well with it. But Austin, I think, he's not a friend of mine. I don't think too much of the guy personally. I think anybody that beats up women regularly, what's he beating up 3 or 4 different women, not just slap them around and beat them, that he's not much of a man. And I told him that after the Halloween Havoc show where I chased him out of the ring when he did that bogus knee injury. And I went into his dressing room and told him what I thought about him.
Wow. That's pretty...
Wow.
That's, well, I agree with you, and I've always said...
Austin, if you can hear me, brother, I'm not a hard guy to find. You ducked me before, and I'm sure you'll duck me again, tough guy.
Wow.
Nothing like a little, never mind.
What's he going to do? He's, 6'1", 240, 250?
Right, and he's got a bad neck and 2 bad knees. So...
Well, I got 1 kidney and 4 knee operations, but I'm 6'3", 280, and I'll probably 10 years on the guy, and I'd still tear him up.
Wow.
You were around... go ahead, Eric.
Okay, well, thank you. You were around when the NWO came in. What was it like? How did the NWO change the landscape of WCW?
Well, that was just the end when Hall and Nash came in, and Hall and Nash are 2 of the best talents in our business. They got the interview, they got the look, they got the work, but you couldn't have 2 guys more detrimental to a company. They came in and caused more friction between all the talent. They really weren't with what they brought into the show. And there's where Hogan is a master. They were coming in, WCW is going to put the big gas on them, make them the big stars. Hogan flipped over, turned heel, jumped on top of the NWO bandwagon, and rode it to the top and made him hotter than ever. You got to give Hogan credit. He's a master.
Absolutely. You made a remark in an interview that I read, and I think it was conducted a couple years ago, that some believe that Vince McMahon sent down Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and later on Vince Russo to kill WCW. Do you personally believe that?
No, I really don't, but it's a good story. A lot of guys talk about that, but I don't think that. I think, Vince is just a master also. A lot of guys... I did a talk show with a kid that just got canned by WWF, and he was, that Vince McMahon, he treated us like pieces of meat. I'm like, well, son, what the hell you think you are, kid? If you want a friend, go buy a puppy. Vince is a promoter. He's no different than a music promoter or a boxing promoter, and he's going to use you up and spit you out. And you got to realize that going up there. You go up and hang on as long as you can, make as much money as you can, and enjoy the ride. But don't expect nothing from Vince. He's your boss. He's not your friend.
You mentioned when Hogan turned heel, there was a couple of promos that you cut on him on Nitro, where you challenged him to matches, and they never seemed to happen. Why do you think that program never took place?
I think Bischoff and Russo in particular didn't like my gimmick. They just, especially there at the end, they were trying to push me out of the company, and they just didn't ever happen.
I'm sure everyone has seen or heard about the Thunder where you announced that you had cancer, and I think, speaking for myself, and I'm sure James will agree with me, I mean, everybody pretty much had a tear in their eye when you cut that interview. It was really powerful, really emotional. Were you comfortable showing that side of yourself on TV?
Nope, not at all. A friend of mine, Terry Taylor, when I found out when I was diagnosed with cancer, I just didn't want to see nobody, didn't want to talk to nobody. And Terry, who I've known for years, he says, Jim, these fans have been with you for 20 plus years. They'd want to know, they'd want to share this with you, and you should tell them. And it was extremely hard to go on national TV and tell everybody that I had cancer, because, of course, at that time we didn't realize if I was even going to survive, much less be able to come back to wrestling. But just with the grace of God and early detection, saved my life.
Absolutely, and I want to give a little personal story. We interviewed Bobby Heenan, and off the air, he said, "Kid, the only thing that's important in life is your friends and your family. It's not the money. It's nothing else." He said, everybody should get cancer once in their life because it really puts life in perspective. Would you agree with that, having gone through it?
No, I wouldn't wish cancer on anybody. I mean, sure, you have a whole different perspective on life, especially when you realize your own mortality. But my very good friend, one of my best in the business, is fighting for his life right now, Steve Dr. Death Williams.
Yeah, we were going to interview him about a year ago, and that's when he started going to chemo. And
right. And,
yeah, he's a great guy.
And that's one thing about going full cycle in the business, starting off in the small little shows and all that, and then working your way up to the bigger shows and the bigger territories, and going to events and doing WrestleManias and working at the Garden, and then working your way back down, and now here I am again doing National Guard armories in high school gyms. And I think just doing that, you kind of get to respect life in general, because you see, how fragile it is with how many guys have dropped by at the wayside.
Definitely.
When you came back, the crowd was absolutely going crazy, chanting USA and Ho, and they were all with you. But they never seemed to push you.
Right, yeah. Well, one show in particular I did in Denver, Colorado, where I worked with Big Brian, Brian Adams. And,
right.
And I took a pile driver there, and I didn't really like to take it from Brian because he's
sloppy.
Wasn't very good at giving them, and this was after my cancer ordeal. And but I went ahead and did it. And after I did the job, 1, 2, 3, right in the middle of the ring, Brian got up, got his hand raised, no reaction. He walked out of the ring. I stood up, I gave him a ho. The whole place was on their feet, ho, and I said, USA! And that place was rocking. I went right back into the dressing room. I'm pounding my chest. Bischoff! I said, you can't kill me off. You beat me every single night. You can't kill me off. It makes no difference what you do to me. And, of course, we had just a little personality conflict going on there. And towards the end of my run there at WCW, I really believe they were just trying to push me out of the contract with the janitor deal,
right,
and then the Canadian deal. And, of course, the janitor said, they called me in there, Hacksaw, we're going to have you become the janitor of the WCW. I said, that's great, fine, whatever you do, put me on TV, I'll get myself over. It makes no difference what you do with me. And some of the janitor gimmicks were the highest rated segments of the show.
Right.
And then the Canadian gimmick, and they called me in the office again, they say, Hacksaw, we're going to turn you against America. And I'm like, geez, 20 years I've been carrying a flag, and something I really feel, I wonder if they're going to, turn me to Korea or Iraq, Iran, what's the deal?
Right.
And we're going to give you the Team Canada, And that's like, well, it's not like we have a lot of heat with Canada anyway. But,
right.
And then I'm in the ring with, poor Lance Storm, and Lance is a good kid and an okay wrestler.
Right.
But, he's standing out there saying, can I please have everyone's attention? And I'm walking around behind him being Hacksaw.
Right.
I say, Hacksaw, you're taking away from the kid out there. I said, well, it's not my fault the kid can't carry the load. If he's out there whispering into the mic and I'm stomping around the ring chasing major guns around, I can't turn my stuff down. He's got to turn his up.
As you just mentioned, you became the janitor during the Bischoff and Russo era, and you also became the TV champion during this period. And the way they had you do that, obviously, was finding the belt in the trash that Scott Hall had dumped in around November. What did you think of that angle? I mean, of finding a belt in a trash can that, you know...
It actually worked well, yeah. I was really happy with it. It took off pretty good. Jimmy Hart and I did a lot with that stuff. We had the Saturday afternoon shows, and we were doing as big as numbers as the Thursday night shows with an eighth of the budget that they had. You know, me and Kevin Sierra would go out there. He would be doing the Cuban deal, and I'd be doing the USA, and the folks would really appreciate it. What I think has happened to wrestling, it used to be professional wrestling on television.
Right.
Now it's a television show about wrestling. It's like Baywatch, but instead of the lifeguards in the ocean, it's the wrestlers in the wrestling ring. Even in the WCW, I would come in at the end, and I'd have some 22-year-old kid come up to me and say, Hacksaw, here's your verbiage for your interview. And I said, how's some young punk kid going to tell Hacksaw Jim Duggan how to cut his interview? They're like, well, this is what we'd like you to say. I said, well, I'll say it. Send me my check, baby. It was like being on the Titanic. You knew the ship was going down, so you just hung on as long as you could.
Yep, absolutely.
A lot of people felt that WCW went too far when Goldberg came out and they had him punch you in the kidneys and you were spitting up blood. What did you think of that?
Well, I was glad to be involved in something again, you know. Of course, and the deal is he hit me on the side. I don't have a kidney on that side. Doesn't bother me at all. But it was good to be involved again. That's when they were going through revolving doors with bookers, and some people would appreciate what I could do in the ring, and where other people didn't. You know, guys like Bischoff and Russo, they don't think you're doing a good job wrestling unless you do a couple of head scissors and a couple of fancy Dan moves and fly off the top ropes. Even if the people sit on their hands and watch all that. If I can go out there and stick my thumb up in the air and have, 70-80% of the audience stand up and say, "Oh, tell me, who's the better professional wrestler?"
Right.
Exactly.
This is the argument.
Wrestling, they lost it. They went after the college kids, and they wanted to be real hot and clicky and compete with Vince, who's an adult programming now.
Right.
Yeah.
I argue this point all the time that, yes, it's wrestling, and yes, it's great that you're an athlete, but the bottom line is, do the fans connect with you?
Right, exactly. And I think that's why the Indies are so hot, or not so hot, but why the Indies are doing okay is because they offer more traditional type wrestling in a family type atmosphere. No obscene gestures, no profanity, good versus evil, and it's a traditional type wrestling that appeals to our fans. My wife's grandmother, who watched wrestling her whole life, she quit watching it when it's turned into guys up there going, suck it, and giving the bird and drinking beer in the ring. They lost their fan base. And I think that's hurting them. And I think maybe Vince's pendulum is swinging back the other way, where down the road I think they'll start going back to more characters.
Do you think they can do that, though? Because will there be like a bad reputation based on this turn?
Bad reputation with, what do you mean?
By having, example, Austin, flipping the bird and drinking beer.
Well, even, I tell you, these local promoters that run these indie shows always have trouble getting buildings because the guy that owns the building is like, well, I don't want people up there, giving the bird the, and we say, no, it's not that type of show. But yeah, anything can happen in wrestling. It's professional wrestling. You can push guys like Jeff Jarrett or Diamond Dallas Page. You just push it down the people's throat until they get over a little bit. But no matter how hard you push them, they'll never get over strong.
Wow.
You mentioned the indies. I just want to know if you've heard of this indie, and if so, what's your opinion on it? Ring of Honor.
No, I've heard a little bit about it, but I really don't know much about it. I've never worked for them and never talked to those guys. So,
Oh, okay.
I just do a few indies a month just to kind of keep my hand in it because. I really love the business. I love being out on the road. I enjoy seeing the young guys coming up with their gimmicks, working hard in the ring. That's why I try to tell these boys. I said, this is professional wrestling. The oddity of WWF, that's just some strange phenomenon that happened. Professional wrestling is 4 or 5 guys in a car driving 300 miles and telling stories. That's the business. It's nice to be back in it like that, at that level.
Well, going back just a couple steps, did you realize WCW was as far gone as it was? I mean, did you realize it was going to go and close?
Everybody knew it was going under. Yeah, everybody did. And everybody was involved with the company. And that's why Orndorff took a bump at the end of it. He hadn't wrestled in like 3 years, went out to the ring one of the last matches, took a bump and got carried down in an ambulance. So he could sue him. I mean, everybody knew they wanted to get your last little bit of money. You wanted to negotiate, even you negotiated a small contract at the end. you know that contract would be honored. I got paid 8 months after the company went under. It was crazy. And it kind of, and that's what killed the business. They're just throwing money for the WCW. They were just throwing, $1 million contracts to Hall and Nash, and even Bret Hart, who's a good friend of mine. But I think it hurt in the long run.
You were part of the XWF. Did you ever expect that to take off?
Yeah, I sure did. I thought because it offered an alternative. I don't think anybody will ever compete with McMahon.
Right.
It's just too big of a machine. It's up in New York, and he's the best there is in professional wrestling promotion-wise. But I thought it would offer the fans an alternative, a more family-type traditional wrestling show. And yeah, I was surprised that it didn't do a little better.
Speaking of a more family-type atmosphere, my family and I recently went to TNA Orlando. It was quite a family-oriented show that was extremely appropriate. What did you think about your few appearances in TNA?
Well, the first time I went up there, I did a little deal with Disco and some other kid that was up there. They were talking about teaming me up with one of the Moondogs and getting a little run out of it.
Yeah, he passed away, by the way.
Right, which was definitely worth listening to see what's going on. Because if you're not on TV in the business, you're just stagnating. So I went and checked that out a couple times, and I saw that they were just going to try to use me to build their young talent. Beat me and not doing nothing for me. And then the last time they brought me in to work with Jarrett, that was a favor for Jimmy Hart, who's been a friend of mine at 20-plus years. And he called me and asked me to come up, and I knew I'd come up and get kabonged with the guitar. And that did nothing for me, but that was a favor for Jimmy.
So what are you up to these days, other than, with the indies and the real estate? Anything else?
Oh, yeah, well, I'm really active here in the community of Titusville, Florida, which is right by the Space Center. I co-host a deep-sea fishing tournament. I have my Hacksaw Jim Duggan Celebrity Golf Tournament coming up at the end of April. I talk to the schools. I ride with the cops. I'm real active here in the community. I'm on the board of directors for the Children's Home Society for Abused and Neglected Children. I have two little girls that are 10 and 11, and of course, the big thing is the DDC, which I'm sure Paige would get a kick out of, the DDP, but we're the Duggan Development Company here in Florida. I just bought 41 acres on Merritt Island, and we've got that up for sale for $2.9 million, and things are just really happening.
You're not finding any more gators in your pool, are you?
No, I tell you, a lot of the guys, Brian Knobs and Nasty Boys called me because, that alligator was in the pool, and it even made the Sports Illustrated. Unbelievable how much press I got on that. And he called me up and he said, Duggan, how long did it take you to catch that alligator to throw in your pool? He thought I staged the deal. The alligator pushed his way through the pool screen. Yeah, it was quite an adventure.
I remember reading that and it was just laughing because I have family out in the Jacksonville area, and it was just hysterical to think that could happen to them too.
Oh yeah, that's during mating season alligators, and we're not too far from a little lake, and they wander all around. And it was only about a 4-foot alligator, but our cats were a little nervous to say the least.
Do you mind doing some word associations before?
Sure, go ahead, brother.
Okay, if you have a one-word answer, that's fine. But if you have a story, that's great too. The first one I have for you is Jake the Snake Roberts.
Jake the Snake. Jake was one of my best friends in the business. Was actually in my wedding, and might have been my best man, except my dad was my best man. But Jake got on the pipe, and just we had a falling out years ago. And I know I just saw him the other day at that convention you guys were talking about.
Yeah. And
hopefully he straightened his life out.
We interviewed him, and he says that he's straightened out, but hopefully that'll stay the case. So.
The next one I have is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Shawn, I respect Shawn because he worked hard and came up through the business, but he's just not my kind of guy.
How about Randy Savage?
Randy is nuts. He believes his own press, especially after the Spider-Man movie. He just really got his head so big that it was really hard to deal with. Yeah, and Macho talks to me. I said, Macho, stand up when you already are. I'm sorry, you're a little short. I understand that it was down at TNA. He had to have bodyguards. Legit bodyguards. Hired one, Brian Adams, and somebody else to watch his back. And I tell you, Hogan went down there, and he's been blasting Hogan on the radio. I'm going to get you, Hogan. I'm going to get you.
He did it on this show, too.
He says, you got a problem, Randy? Let's go outside in the parking lot and talk about it. Oh, no, that's okay, Hulkster.
Yeah. Jimmy Hart actually told us that Hogan was actually kind of just being cordial. He wasn't even,
right? Yeah, no,
macho.
it wasn't like he called him out hard. He says, "If we got a problem, let's go out and talk about it." He wasn't coming in blowing smoke, but Macho was blowing so much smoke in the long run that Hogan had to say something to him.
All right, I got to warn you, the next couple names we've lost over the few years, and some of them are real shocks to me. How about Miss Elizabeth?
Miss Liz, God bless her. I really enjoyed Liz, and I spit on that no-good jerk that beat her up. I mean, Lex Luger, gas to the max. What kind of man would raise a fist to Liz? You could bruise Liz up by yelling at her. And a friend of mine, Scott Everhart, a financial dude, went to her wedding, her funeral, and said she still had cake makeup on from all the bruising that jerk did to her. I loved Liz. I thought she was a great little girl and was a really last classy lady of professional wrestling.
How about Hercules?
Herc was a tragic story, man. He just was one of those guys you knew down the road his life was just going to catch up with him, and it did.
How about one half of, in my opinion, the greatest tag team of all time, Road Warrior Hawk?
Hawk, yeah, I got along okay with Hawk. We weren't really buddies, but I got along pretty good with Hawk. And like you said, I agree with you. I think they were one of the greatest tag teams.
How about probably the funniest guy that I know in the business and history, Curt Hennig?
Curt was a very good friend of mine. Been to Kurt's house, he's been to mine. Curt could rib anywhere, anybody, and he just was a lot of fun to have on the road. But just another guy, a tragic end. These guys got to realize as you get older, you can't do the things that you used to do, and it caught up with him. And it was a shame, with his family, a bunch of little girls and boys, and just to pass away like that in the hotel room, it was tragic.
Yeah. We only got two more depressing ones, then we have two more after that, and then we'll let you go. But thank you so much for your time. The last two that I have for you that are depressing is the Big Boss Man.
Big Boss, yeah. I had Big Boss Man's last match with him over in Tokyo, Japan, when I beat him for the IWA heavyweight title over there. And he didn't look good in Japan, and I'm sorry to see him go. But that whole group of guys, they all hung together. Kurt, Boss, Rude, and Von Erich, and all four of them are dead.
Well, yeah, the next name actually was Rick Rude.
Yeah, Rude, I didn't really like Rude too much. He reminds me a little macho. I think he believed his own press. He thought he was a big star, and he thought he was a tough guy, and I just didn't like him that much, to tell you the truth.
Okay, I got three names left for you, and then we'll let you go. The last is, three last ones are the guy that you probably wrestled more in your career than anybody else, Ted DiBiase.
Theodore DiBiase, old Teddy.
Yep.
Good to see Teddy change his life around. I've worked for Teddy on these his church shows, and he puts on a nice show. They put you up in the Hyatt or the Hilton, and it's a great payday, and it's a great bunch of folks. But I used to rib Teddy in the old days. I mean, we used to be like Dan Fielding on Night Court. If there was a girl, he was going to hit on her. If we're going through the airport, and you only see this girl for 10 minutes, Teddy would hit on her. Of course, I always had one of my best interviews. I always thought I'd say, Ted DiBiase may be the greatest technical wrestler in the sport today, but he can't fight a lick. And when you get in the ring with me, DiBiase, it's going to be a fight. Hey, Duggan, geez, don't say that. Every night I go out, I have trouble.
Eric, you want to take the next one?
Yeah. How about Eric Bischoff?
Eric, I don't know really what to say about Bischoff. He's a guy that obviously must be good at what he does because he's still around, surprisingly. He was a kind of Napoleonic type person, a small little guy that, as he got more and more power, he got harder and harder to deal with. At the end, I called my wife one day and I said, honey, if I didn't have two little girls, I would have dropped him tonight. But it changes things when you have a family. So the one thing good I can say about Bischoff and the WCW is when I was going through my cancer ordeal, they did stick by me and keep me on contract and were supportive. So no matter, personally how much I disliked the guy, I got to, give him kudos for standing up when the chips were down.
How about Vince?
Vince, like I said before, he's a promoter. I respect Vince, and to this day, I still make money off Vince McMahon. I mean, every quarter I get a residual check. These last new action figures that came out, the Jakks Pacific WW action figures.
Those are cool.
Yeah, they're great. Kind of gave all the old-timers a little extra boost. especially over in Japan, has really kind of helped me over there. And, you know, even on the independent shows or radio shows, anything anybody wants to talk about, it's very seldom WCW or Mid-South. Everybody wants to talk about the WWF. So I thank Vince for giving me that opportunity to make some money up there and make my name, but I wouldn't invite him to my house for Christmas.
Well, we definitely thank you for your time, Hacksaw. It's been an absolute honor. And remember, everyone, check out the website.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
HacksawJimDuggan.com.
And thank you so much for your time, sir. And
okay, fellas, now before we go, guys, I got to get a decent hoe out of you boys. Are you ready?
All right.
I want to know that pussy Ric Flair. Woo! I don't understand how Rick gets so high, you know. I think his pants are too tight or something. But we're going to get a big hoe. You guys ready? Here we go, fellas. Oh, USA! I'm starting to fire up now, tough guy.